Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Tom Wolfe's novel, The Bonfire, The Vanities. I read this on ebook, so I don't have a cover to show you. I was going to read Kim Stanley Robinson's 2312, but I ended up getting really absorbed into this, so I'm going to review this instead while it's fresh, and I'll read 2312 next time. Review 2312 for next time. I'm also going to do two separate videos for this book, one spoiler-free, which is going to be this video, and one with a deeper reading of the book and spoilers throughout, so I'll make sure to label that in the titles. And I'll also leave a link to in the comments below. So this novel, The Bonfire, The Vanities, was written by Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe is best known for his this novel, as well as his earlier writings of essays and nonfiction. He wrote The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test about the Merry Pranksters, and I believe the 50s, The Right Stuff about the space program, and then as well as other essays, and then kind of this is probably still his best known novel. This came out, I believe, in 1987, and unfortunately Tom Wolfe passed away a few years ago. But this is about, it's a little bit difficult to describe succinctly because it's such a large, it's about over 600 pages, and there's just a lot jam-packed into those 600 pages. But it's primarily focused on a single character whose name is Sherman McCoy, who is a bond salesman in the 1980s. He's very successful at what he does. He lives in a multi-million-dollar co-op with his wife and his daughter. He also has a mistress, and one evening he gets lost after picking her up. They go into the Bronx where he accidentally, him and the mistress, run over a youth who then goes into a coma after being run over. And there are several other characters who kind of play into this, and they kind of, you see the backdrop of how what's going on. There's an election that's coming up. The Bronx during this time was 70% black and Hispanic, and so he goes on trial for this accident. And that's just a real brief overview without spoiling anything of what goes on in the book. There's other really important characters, like his mistress is very important. There's other kind of semi-viewpoint characters. There's a journalist who's covering the story whose name is Peter Fallow, who's an English journalist. And then there's also I don't know if he's an assistant district attorney, I guess would be his title, whose name is Kramer. And Kramer is hell-bent on getting McCoy convicted for this crime, in order primarily to advance his own career, really. But those are the main characters of the novel, and there's other characters who are also equally important, both inside the Justice Department and also inside the Bronx, inside the New York Department of Justice, as well as other kind of community members who are important in the book. And what I liked about the book is it really there's several things I liked about it, but one of the pros of it is that they just kind of drop you in to the world. The first chapter is with the mayor of New York City, who is, I believe is in the Bronx, but he's having a press conference, and there's a riot that takes place. And that kind of first chapter does a really good job of painting kind of the political backdrop to what's going to happen. So I thought that was interesting. I think all the characters in the novel have some kind of flaw. Every one of them who you meet has some kind of moral gray area or moral failing. They're not necessarily all monsters, but there's really no, as you're reading this, there's no shining knights in this book. Everyone has certain foibles or certain handicaps or something going on with them that I thought was really interesting. I think it's beautifully paced. You kind of see about a third of the novel how these characters are on kind of a collision course, and it's really, you're reading to see what happens. It's not very predictable. You don't know what's going to happen, and it's just very well paced that way. The plot is very well laid out, and then the beginning and end mirror each other, which is kind of cool. The first scene and the last scene mirror each other in kind of a really interesting way. So I really liked all those things. I think the themes of it really resonated with me in terms of class and race in the Justice Department. There's a chapter early on in the book where, before kind of the McCoy thing takes center stage, there's a chapter where Kramer is in the courtroom with the judge, and he's kind of talking about how the Department of Justice works in the Bronx during this time and how they just kind of crank through cases, and kind of the judge reacts to a public defender not being available when he needs to have him available, and just kind of watching that. It just was really a peek behind the curtain. I guess Tom Wolfe did do extensive research in this book as far as sitting on cases, so I'm sure a lot of this took place from, I'm sure there was artistic license, but I think it also took place, I'm sure, from his viewpoint. In addition to that, there's definitely party scenes where you see kind of the upper crust, and you see kind of McCoy's going through his business and going to parties and doing all these things, and when he's on the floor selling bonds, there's that scene. So there's just really memorable scenes in the book that I really enjoyed. I guess if there is a downside or things I didn't like, there's a couple plot points that I kind of had issues with. There's a plot device that's maybe used once more than it needed to be, and it kind of confuses things a little bit. And then there is an epilogue at the end, and I don't think quite every story kind of reaches a satisfactory conclusion, as far as I wanted to learn a little bit more about one or two characters in the end of the novel who aren't really mentioned. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. Even though this book was written in 1987, you could read this today, because the themes of the book, as far as being in the middle of a media storm and what that does to someone, issues of race and class, like I said before, issues of justice, there's just a lot there. There's a lot to this book that I found it really meaty, and I really enjoyed it. So I definitely would recommend to people who are interested in those kind of themes. I think that if I was going to tell someone not to read this, I would probably tell someone who has difficulty with, if you really like your stories simplistic and you really like your characters cut and dried, like good or evil, this is probably not the book for you. I think some of the language is written in dialect, and sometimes that can be iffy for some people. So those are maybe the things I think that some people may have issue with. It's very much a piece of the time. So I did notice when I was reading it that there are female characters in the novel who aren't given, you don't really see necessarily their viewpoints of the things as much as some of the men. And so, but to me, that was more of, that was the way they were viewed in these areas of society at that time. Tom Wolfe kind of knows this, and he kind of makes references to it throughout the book. But at the same time, one of the characters in specific, really two of the characters I can kind of point to, I would have liked to have their story. I think it would have made the book a little bit longer. And the book is actually relatively good about cutting out things that are unnecessary to the plot. There's really maybe only one or two scenes, and even in those scenes that aren't absolutely necessary to the plot, I think they go into the themes and the verisimilitude of the city in ways that are important. So maybe that's why he didn't include them, or maybe they are just incidental in the way he was writing it. But I did notice that as well. But again, that to me is more of bringing up a mirror to society than anything else. So that's The Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe. Really enjoyed it. Like I said, look for my spoiler full review here coming up. But as always, please, if you liked this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also leave a link to my Twitter account below. Till next time, bye.